Hi, my name is Toby Schmidt. In this video, I'll be talking about the normal histology of the skin. So the skin is divided into the epidermis superficially and the dermis. Also visible in this section is the subcutaneous adipose tissue. This is located deep to the dermis. It's not considered a component of the skin per se, but it is deeper to the skin. So let's take a closer look at the epidermis first. So the epidermis is composed of multiple layers of keratinocytes. And I'm going to be going from bottom to top here because that's how the skin normally grows. Basal layer matures and becomes the other layers until it eventually becomes the stratum corneum. So let's talk about the basal layer of the skin first. So the basal layer keratinocytes is the single layer of cells that's attached to the dermoepidermal junction. And these cells over time will mature and they'll go upwards and they will become the spinous layer or the stratum spinosum. And the keratinocytes of the stratum spinosum are polygonal in shape. They're sort of hexagonal or maybe pentagons. And they're connected by these thin eosinophilic strands known as intercellular bridges. And intercellular bridges contain desmosomes, which anchor keratinocytes to one another. Now, if we go to the superficial-most aspect of the epidermis, then now we're into the granular layer, also known as stratum granulosum, if you like Latin. And the stratum granulosum contains these cells with this coarse basophilic material in their cytoplasm that's known as keratohyalin material. So once keratinocytes reach that granular layer, they will finally die and they will become just acellular keratin, and that layer is known as the stratum corneum. So the stratum corneum normally is composed of these strand-like keratin fragments, and it's separated by this clear space. This is known as a basket weave stratum corneum. That's the normal appearance of the stratum corneum. Now, some other aspects of the epidermis that are not necessarily super visible in that section include the presence of these finger-like protrusions into the dermis. These are known as reedy ridges. There's another reedy ridge right here. There's another reedy ridge right here. And another feature that wasn't as clearly seen in the previous section is the presence of melanocytes. So not all of the cells in the epidermis are keratinocytes. This is a melanocyte right here. And I know it's a melanocyte because it's got a cytoplasm that has a different color compared to the kind of dense eosinophilia of the keratinocyte cytoplasm. This cytoplasm is kind of grayish or palely eosinophilic, and that's the color of a melanocyte. Let's see if we can find a couple more melanocytes. So here's another melanocyte here, nucleus of this pale eosinophilic to grayish cytoplasm. And another good way to recognize melanocytes is the fact that their cytoplasm sort of retracts into their nucleus and leaves behind this clear cleft-like space. Now, that's in contrast to keratinocytes, where, yes, they have these intercellular bridges separating them, but really there's not a whole lot of space between the end of the cytoplasm of one keratinocyte and the cytoplasm of the adjacent keratinocyte, because they're so linked together by those intercellular bridges. Whereas melanocytes, they have that cleft-like space between their cytoplasm and their neighboring keratinocytes. So now let's talk about the next layer of the skin, the dermis. So the dermis is everything from the epidermis all the way down to the subcutaneous adipose tissue, this clear stuff down here. And the dermis is predominantly composed of collagen. And it's this brightly eosinophilic, curvilinear material, and it's separated by these clear spaces. These collagen bundles make up the vast majority of the dermis, although we can also see some other structures in the dermis. So we can see these kind of round or ovoid spaces lined by these nuclei. These are capillaries, so small blood vessels that don't have too much of a wall, but are just lined by a single layer of endothelial cells. Here we can see another vessel right here. And we want to find a slightly bigger vessel. Here we are. So here's a slightly bigger vessel. This is probably an arteriole or a venule. It's hard to tell the difference really between those two vessels, but as you can see, compared to the capillary, it has a bit of a smooth muscle wall to it, so a little bit thicker than your capillary. And right beside it, we have some nerve bundles. And nerve bundles have these sort of wavy, spindled nuclei, and they have this pale eosinophilic cytoplasm. By the way, that right there, that's a mast cell. It's got this perfectly circular, dark nucleus, so-called resembles a fried egg, according to some people. I guess if you have an imagination for that kind of thing. All right, so what else do we have in the dermis? Well, probably the most obvious thing in this slide, at least, is this structure in the center. This is a hair follicle, and this is the epithelium of the hair follicle. Just like the epidermis, it's composed of keratinocytes, and as you can see, it is continuous with the epidermis. So here's the epidermis, and it just transitions into this hair follicle epithelium. And at the center, we see this acellular structure. This is the hair shaft, so the actual hair itself protruding up from the surface. Quite a long hair here. Here we also see another hair follicle with another hair shaft in the center. This time the hair shaft has been displaced slightly from where it normally would be due to tissue processing. Here's another hair follicle. Hair shaft we're not seeing in this section, so maybe it disappeared during tissue processing somehow. Other things we can say about the hair follicle, well, we've got this clear structure right here. Let's take a closer look. This is actually a sebaceous gland. And I know it's a sebaceous gland because it's got this clear cytoplasm to the cells. And these cells are known as sebocytes. Sebocytes have this multivacuolated clear cytoplasm, and it's filled with lipid droplets. These are going to secrete sebum, or this oily material, to the skin surface and impart sort of an oily quality to the skin. And then we have another structure here also related to this hair follicle, and this is the erector pili muscle. The erector pili muscle is a type of smooth muscle. And a good way to recognize smooth muscle under the microscope is the fact that it has these elongated nuclei that sort of, they don't really have these tapered ends like most spindle cells, but they have this blunt end to each side. And this is known as a cigar-shaped nucleus. Smooth muscle also has eosinophilic cytoplasm, and it often has these cytoplasmic vacuoles. Those are actually filled with glycogen, glycogen being the fuel that the smooth muscle cells need to keep going and keep working. And speaking of working, when these erector pili muscles contract, hair will stand on end. So that's what gives us goosebumps, also known as piloerection. And it's going to make the hair stand up. Finally, I wanted to talk about another structure located in the dermis, or even in the subcutis in this case. But we have these circular structures with these clear lumens. Eccrine sweat coils are structures that secrete sweat. Let's take a look at some more. So this is a different section of skin, slightly different staining. You can tell it's more eosinophilic overall. But in this case, we have more eccrine sweat coils. And this one actually has some sweat that you can see. This is this granular eosinophilic material. And what happens to that sweat is it will eventually get secreted into the surface, and it does so through these structures. And this is known as the acrosyringium. So the acrosyringium contains these lumens through which the sweat will eventually travel to the outside world. Here's another acrosyringium right beside it, again with the lumens. that's going to create a passageway for this sweat to travel. There's one more structure I wanted to share with you guys that was not visible in that slide, and that's these glands. And these glands look somewhat similar to those eccrine glands I showed you, maybe a bit more dilated, a bit larger. But these cells lining these glands have a bit of an interesting quality. They have these cytoplasmic protrusions that sort of project into the lumens. And these are known as apocrine snouts. So these are all apocrine cells, and they are lining an apocrine gland. Other clues to apocrine cells are abundant eosinophilic cytoplasm, as well as prominent nucleoli. And these apocrine glands are going to essentially secrete part of their cytoplasm into the lumen. You can see a little bit of a circular structure there. That used to be part of one of these apocrine cell cytoplasm, and now it's broken off and secreted into the lumen. And apocrine glands are normally not present everywhere in the skin. They're only in select sites normally. So the armpit, also known as the axilla, they are present in genital skin, breast skin, and also in the eyelids, so-called the glands of mole. But apocrine glands are responsible actually for body odor. So this is basically the process. What happens is the cytoplasm of these cells gets broken off, gets secreted to the skin surface, and then bacteria will be able to break that down because it has lipids and proteins in the cytoplasm. And then the bacterial waste products will accumulate. That's what actually creates that smell. So that's why, if you haven't showered in a little while, you're going to have some body odor. So finally, we're going to talk about the subcutaneous fat. This is a relatively simple structure. Because of the way tissue processing works, fat just gets washed out during processing. So it appears as this white space. So adipocytes are going to appear as these clear, round to ovoid structures. There's another adipocyte there. And that's pretty much it for subcutaneous adipose tissue. So that pretty much wraps up my intro to skin histology. If you guys want to check out any of these slides that I've shown, head over to pathlibrary.com. There are also annotated histologic features. So pretty much everything I've gone over, you can do so yourself in an interactive way just by clicking on some keywords, and it'll show you various layers of the skin. So pathlibrary.com, I will see you there.